So the question I am curious to know is, could you do the Mat Men without Andrew? And do you think he could do it without you?
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, who just hit his laptop. He got so excited for this interview. Today, I'm joined by Rich from the Mat Men podcast. So welcome to the show, Rich.
Tom, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I am glad to be here. I liked your intro. It was very sweet, very nice, very endearing.
Oh, that hurt as well. I'm not going to lie. So if we take this back, where does Rich first discover wrestling before your work in the wrestling media?
Oh my God. I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. I'm turning 41 in a couple of months. So when I was a kid, like my first experience with wrestling was definitely just watching East Coast North American TV, heavily WWE influenced, WWF back then, obviously. And I think it was just a child of the 80s. It was Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, The Ultimate Warrior, Jake the Snake, Mr. Perfect, and the Rockers. I used to be a huge Rockers fan when I was a kid. Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty, and I used to be a huge Killer Bees fan when I was a kid too. Just like watching TV with no cable in New York as a kid, and that was like the first time of being like, yo, this is nuts. Like whatever I'm watching right now, Roddy Piper, the show, the cartoon, which I can't remember the name of.
The Rock and
Wrestling. Yeah, Rock and Wrestling. Like I used to love the cartoon. I had the figures. Like it's been a trip, you know. So like very early on, I was a fan of wrestling, and I don't really think I ever had a departure from it, you know, like maybe like here and there, but nothing where I've stayed away from it for like multiple years, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So what was it in the 80s that got you like, this is my jam sort of thing? Like, what was it that you basically endeared wrestling to you?
I think the larger than life characters, and I feel like that's such a weird pat response, but I don't know. I vividly remember watching, let's say, like Superstars as a kid, right? And Superstars would come on like Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, and then being like, yo, who are these people? Like, what's up with this guy? Like, what's up with Hulk Hogan? You know, what's up with Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, or Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker? And, you know, like those are like the formative years of watching wrestling. I used to watch it with my dad. My mom never cared about it, which is fine, but it was very like late 80s, early 90s, that aggro kind of attitude when it came to promos or when it came to like in-ring action even. And you could study all that stuff now, which I love doing, you know, like even as like an adult, it's like, you know, you look at those old Hogan matches and he's got an arena full of people, a sold out arena full of people on their feet, clapping, hands in the air. They're emotionally invested. And I think that bled through, you know, on my CRT 19-inch television screen when I was like 9 years old, you know?
Yeah, totally. And the question I always like to ask now at this point is, if you were to discover that wrestling now, at the age you are now, with no prior experience in wrestling, with wrestling, do you think you'd still be into it?
Do I think I'd still be into it?
Yeah, if you discovered that sort of wrestling as an adult.
You're breaking up a little bit, Tom. I apologize.
If you discovered that sort of wrestling as an adult, do you think you'd be into it?
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely. Like, I love spectacle like nobody's business, you know? And I think that spectacle is so timeless, you know, like I'll give you an example of like seeing The Undertaker in the funeral parlor with Paul Bearer looking like how he looks, and seeing The Undertaker looking like how he looks, like a dude who's like 7 feet tall who looks like an undead cowboy. I would that's my milieu. That's my style. Like, I love that. As an adult, if I discovered it now, I'd be like, where have I been? Where has this been all my life? Have I been asleep under a rock? And it's kind of funny because you know, I used to have like pretty like massive WrestleMania parties in our apartment in Queens, and our apartment's not that big. It's a great apartment, but you can really only fit a certain number of people in here like comfortably, and that number is usually around 10 or 12, right? My wife and I would have these WrestleMania parties where we would have like, at some point, I think our max number was 42 people at one time, right?
Oh, no.
And a lot of those people, and like we get all the food, we get all the drinks, we bartend, we do all this stuff. So we take care of everybody. You know, like if you're coming over, you're going to get food, you're going to get drink, you're probably going to get drunk. I would make a menu, and all the drinks, all the mixed drinks on the menu would be cocktails I would name after finishing moves, right?
That is dope.
So people would come and just have fun because like through our friend grapevine, it was like, listen, you don't have to like wrestling, but if you want to come and watch something funny and fun and have a couple of drinks and have some food, you know, we'd get like big sandwiches, like we'd get it, like we would do it right, you know, like we would spend a ton of money and just do it right and have all our friends over. And there were times where like folks would watch these events and not be into wrestling at all, and think it was just, oh, dumb Hulk Hogan, dumb John Cena. And then at the end of the night would be like, wait, so what's this guy's story? What's Daniel Bryan's story? Like, what is his deal? You know, like, what's The Undertaker? Who is that guy? Like, that guy looks crazy. What is his deal? You know, oh, that guy's supposed to be his brother. So there's that hook that I think everybody can enjoy at the base level.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the question I always like to ask now is, if you discovered today's wrestling at the childhood stage, do you think you would have got into it as much?
Absolutely. I'm an easy peasy. I'm an easy dude. I think I almost equate today's style of wrestling to discovering the cruiserweight era of WCW or discovering ECW, like the burgeoning ECW scene, you know, because that was also like the next step of like formative years of me in late junior high or like early high school and being like, oh, you know, like WWE is great, WWF is great, WCW is great, but oh, these guys are doing like really nutty shit. Oh, I got a tape trade to see this other guy's matches. I was a big tape trader in high school, and we were lucky that there was a store kind of near our high schools, like our communal high schools, where like, you know, in our neighborhood, it's like, you know, you have a bunch of different schools, but like there was one kind of central hub, and this guy had like, he had all the international tapes. So he would have, you know, like World of Sport, he'd have AJPW, he'd have like burgeoning New Japan, he'd have Wrestling and Romance, like War, and it would be like, all right, let me save up like $40 to get this like bootleg cassette tape and see what happens. I need to get the King of the Death Match. My girlfriend at the time, who is my wife now, she went to the high school that was like 3 blocks away from the store. And every single day I'd be like, can you please check if they have the King of the Death Match VHS tape? Can you please check if they have that? And I think now it's the same feeling, you know, but the access to it is so much easier than when I was a kid, where we would have to hunt these things down. We'd have to almost look at ads in local newspapers or, you know, pre Craigslist and stuff like that. And now it's like, you can just go on YouTube and see every single thing that you want to see. And absolutely, like if I discovered like PWG and AEW and Bullet Club and NJPW now, like I think I would be really just as into it, you know, and like I'm not super into combat sports, but I think like that extraneous stuff has that appeal to it as well, you know, like that adult appeal that's kind of interesting.
Fair enough. So as we move on, you said you didn't have a gap too much, really, correct?
Yeah.
But
so
sorry, continue.
No, I was gonna say like I think there was a gap from the mid 90s to really like Austin coming to the forefront, like 2 years, you know.
So
and
like the new generation era, sort of.
Yeah, so like the gap was basically when WWE got too gimmicky, where you would have like the Goon or Duke the Dumpster Drosy or Crush, you know, and it's like or the Rebo Man and everybody or Doink, and everybody had like a very over the top cartoony gimmick. There was a couple of years where I tuned out, but then all of a sudden, hey, there's this guy called Steve Austin. There's this guy called Rocky Maivia. There's this guy called Triple H. Mick Foley, who I remember from WCW. He's not there anymore. He's not Cactus Jack anymore. He's Mankind. And then that's kind of when, you know, like that little minor gap. And then hearing these things, like the chatter in like the lunchroom and being like, hey, listen, guys, I don't have cable TV. I need somebody to tape this stuff for me. And that's how I would do it. You know, I would have my buddies, you know, just tape Monday Night Raw and give me the tape on Tuesday, and I would just eat it up as soon as school finished.
Fair enough. But what I'm curious to know, with that couple of years gap, what is something that you've maybe gone back and watched on the network from that gap that you're like, oh, I'm sad I missed out on this? And then what is something that you've gone back and watched and gone, thank God I wasn't watching at that point?
Oh, that's a good question. The first part of that question, I think definitely the Austin Brett stuff. You know, like I missed out on that WrestleMania, I think 12 or 13 match.
13.
Yeah.
The one where he's in the sharpshooter and he passes out.
Yeah. Like the sharpshooter, like 13. That whole thing I missed out on. And like I have always been like, you know, like that was what I missed out on, but also like within a couple of years, rapidly watch that. And oh man, that's a good question. As far as stuff that I wish I never saw, like that I could erase from my eyes. I mean, there's a lot. Oh man, you know, it's tough. I don't have, I'll admit to you, I don't have the wrestling memory that my counterpart Andrew does.
Fair enough.
I think his eyebrows retain all the data, like 2 fuzzy hard drives.
Fair enough. So
if that makes sense.
Totally. So you brought up the good man that is Andrew Zarian there. So how did you guys first connect?
Oh, listen. So like this is an interesting story, and I hope you didn't get bored by it, Tom. But when we were kids, preteens into teens, we went to the same Taekwondo school together. We went to the same martial arts school together and became very close friends. The group of people that we went to that school with were still kind of friends to this day. Even though we only text like maybe once or twice a year, like we're still there. And, you know, I've always been in touch with him or around that. And then I think at the dawn of when Facebook really became a thing, we got in touch. And that was, I want to say that was around 2009, 2010, something like that. And we just kind of mutually reached out and been like, hey, I remember you. Like, yeah, like we were like really close. Like what happened, blah, blah, blah. And then Andrew was like, hey, I host a network with a bunch of stuff. Check it out. And I checked it out. And then I was like, oh, funny enough, in college, I was the not general master, the GM of I was the GM of our college radio station.
I know what you mean.
and I've always been into broadcasting, you know, like just kind of by hook or by crook. And it just so happened like, oh, cool. Like I had experience doing this. I really love doing this. You ended up doing this. Let's see what we can do. And we started with the first iteration of my show about comic books called Behind the Counter. And that went well. And then every single episode that we would do with our co-host at the time, it was me, a gentleman named Jonathan Adler, who is one of my best friends, and then Andrew. At the end of every single episode, Andrew would say, hey, I really want to do a pro wrestling show. And I would say, cool, let's do it. We'll do another episode next week. Guys, I really want to do a pro wrestling thing. Cool. Let's do it, dude. Another week. A few months down the line, I'm like, what's stopping us? Like, can we do this? Because I know he has a insane wrestling acumen. I have a pretty decent wrestling acumen. Jonathan had a great wrestling acumen, you know, and it kind of covered everything, you know. So like the gaps that I had, Andrew would fill in, or the gaps that he had, I would fill in. Right.
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit. And he was like, I want to do some test episodes. And I think, honestly, we did maybe 3 or 4 test Mat Men episodes that have never seen the light of day. And then at the end of the 4th one, we were like, we watched it back and we're like, this is good stuff. Like, we can do this. Like, we can definitely do it. And this is also like really like in the when podcasts, before podcasts were like a thing. You know?
When they were in their infancy, correct?
Right. Like, I'm not saying like we were pioneers, but like podcasts were in their infancy. And from our experience, we kind of knew where everything was headed, you know, because like even when I was in school, like in college, and let's say like I went to college from 1999 to 2004. Mm-hmm. Even in the last couple of years of my schooling, our professors would tell us like, by the way, like this is the future. Like, you being able to do stuff from home is what we're working on now, or you being able to do X, Y, and Z from the comfort of your home, having a camera set up, having good audio, having good clarity is where this is going. And even back then, we knew a couple of guys who were doing stuff like it was almost like a CB radio kind of thing, you know, where these guys would just like broadcast on like pirate airwaves, and it would be like a show every week. And it was always fun. And I think that kind of brought me here now, where it's like, oh, I got experience doing this. I can do this on camera. I could do this on the microphone. And we both had that kind of like, we gelled because of that, you know, where like we had this like interesting love of broadcasting and audio and sound. And, you know, like honestly, like, and a little like egotistically, you know, I do like the sound of my own voice to a certain extent.
Fair enough.
I think Andrew.
I think everyone does.
Thing where it's like, you know, honest. Like if anybody's gonna, yeah, absolutely. Like if you're gonna do it on a bigger scale, why not do it right, or try to do it right and then try to get better as we go on, you know? And I think currently now, like every show we put out it's not so much curated, but we definitely try to do our best, you know, and it's simple fundamentals of not having long pauses, no ums and ahs, having fluid thoughts, a little fluidity, having chemistry, being able to have concise opinions and being able to do that live. And the more I've been doing this over the last couple of years, the more I've realized like, cool, you know, like maybe we're alone in the boat in that regard. You know,
I know
we're good at what we do, buddy.
Yeah, fair enough. So how have you seen the Mat Men podcast change since you guys started? Because you talked about them test episodes, and then obviously it's this big sort of conglomerate now. How have you sort of seen it change in between?
That's a good question. I think the change has come from our attitudes towards content, our attitudes towards content and putting content out there. Whereas when we first started, it was very much, it's still a passion project, but when we first started, it was very much a matter of we don't really care who's watching. We're just going to put the stuff out there, you know?
Yeah.
And if you watch those early episodes, there's a lot of pauses. There's a lot of like grunty jokes and which there still is. But I think at that first a few year mark, it wasn't as polished. I think now we're more polished. I think being courted by the Wrestling Observer definitely helped us a lot, you know, like because we had a big discussion about that, like where we had a lot of offers from different resources a couple of years ago, you know, like right as the pandemic started, where we were offered certain things from certain channels and we decided, hey, let's go with the Observer. It's like a tried and true kind of thing. And we were very conscious of the different audience that we were going to have, you know?
Yeah.
So we knew we were polished enough to be on that platform, right? We knew we were unique enough to be on that platform. But we also knew they're going to dump on us until they like us. And if you look at those YouTube comments as when we got to the Observer for a good 6 months, it was all hate, you know?
Yeah.
But trial by fire, we overcame that. We won everybody over. And now if you look at our comments on YouTube or on Twitter or whatever, it's mostly positive. There's always going to be some negative, but I think just because of like our grit and determination in terms of that space, we won people over, you know? So like, that's where we are now. It's like, we're both very conscious of what we put out, what we do, how we carry ourselves, how we interact with people, you know, like we're not assholes. I think that's like a big thing. Like we're never standoffish. We're very open and positive about wrestling. And I think since day one, that's the major thing that we've had in common and has been the driving force of our show. A lot of positivity in this interesting sphere. I'm sorry that was a very long-winded answer.
No, totally cool. It gives me content and stuff like that. But you talked about working with or for the Wrestling Observer now. I'm not quite sure what the right word is, so please help me out with that.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that? You cut out a little bit.
Oh, so like basically you're now working in conjunction or for the Wrestling Observer. I'm not quite sure what the right word is though.
And what's your question?
So basically, when you started working for the Wrestling Observer, what attracted them to your show that you know of? And then did they ask you to make any changes when you first got there?
I think so. It's more of us working with the Wrestling Observer as opposed to working for them. Basically what they told us without giving too much away was, hey, we want you guys to do the same exact thing you guys are doing, but just help us out on our network, do it for our network, and you can go as crazy as you want, except when we tell you not to.
Okay.
And that is usually like doing watch-alongs, or if they need us to do certain content. You know, we can't get like too nuts, which is fine. You know, it's completely understandable. For example, like Andrew does Wrestling Observer Live on Sundays, and he took over for that. And that's a completely different show than the Madman show, you know, and I've been on that several times, and it's very conservative in terms of like wrestling media. And it's more analytical, where our show can go off the rails sometimes, which is great. I think that's, you know, like that's the hook of our show. And, you know, there's really nothing bananas that they said yes or no to, because, you know, they've watched us, they vetted us, and we don't curse, we don't get blue, we don't get nasty, we don't get political, we don't call people out, we don't do the hot take nonsense. Like, it's just like we try to be as entertaining and fun and personable and endearing as possible. And I think that was like the big draw. A couple other places, however, that wanted us to be on their network kind of gave us a list of demands. saying like, well, if you guys sign with us or are in conjunction with us, we may have to own X, Y, and Z. You guys may not have to do X, Y, and Z. You guys may have to be on call with X, Y, and Z. And that, like we're both adults. We have our own gigs as opposed to the wrestling stuff. So that didn't work out,
Yeah,
we were
totally.
maybe like younger, 19, 20, still in school, part-time jobs, sure. But Observer, very familial organization. All the guys there are family guys, like the same kind of we are. So it's like it was a more broader kind of.
So how different, Rich, is your chemistry with Andrew on screen to off screen?
That's a good question. We get asked that all the time. We get observed about that all the time. I think our chemistry is very palpable on screen, and off screen, it's wild. We are like two wild animals. Whenever folks see us together who are fans of our shows or who know us or who subscribe to our channel, et cetera, mainly at wrestling shows. It's never out in public. We always get the comment of, wow, holy shit, I can't believe you guys are such living gorillas towards each other as opposed to like the show, like we're, like I said, we're animals. I mean that in like the best way possible. Off screen, we're kind of turned up to like 11, where on screen we have to dial it down a little bit. And that's like a funny thing that we always joke about, like we dial it down to be good enough for each other on our weekly show. But when you see us in a public situation, all bets are off, and I think when people realize that, they're like, oh, they don't get intimidated, but I think it's just like, oh, this is real,
Yeah. So the question I am curious to know is, could you do the Mat Men without Andrew, and do you think he could do it without you?
I think that's a multi-layered question. Could we do our own wrestling shows without each other? Absolutely. Would it be the same? Absolutely not. I am hard-pressed to find somebody that I have as much chemistry within the realm of pro wrestling as I do with Andrew. And I think he would say the same thing. Like he does Wrestling Observer Live. It's a different show. He does We're Live Pal with Garrett Gonzalez, which is a great show, but it's a different show. And like that's a remote show. Like Andrew's on the East Coast, Garrett's on the West Coast, and Garrett's a great guy, but it's completely different than what we do with Mat Men. Like we love to inject a lot of silliness and dumb stuff and jokes and stupidity in our show because listen, it's pro wrestling. At the end of the day, a lot of people are gonna hate it when I say this, and I've always gotten hate for this. It doesn't matter.
I know what you mean.
Compared to your life, compared to your happiness, your own self-fulfillment, compared to the relationship you have with your significant other or your family or your children or your parents or your brothers and sisters, pro wrestling does not matter. It should not enter into that sphere. That being said, I don't think I have somebody who's on the same page as Andrew and I. And would I want to do another pro wrestling show? I think depending on the situation, probably not. I've been having a lot of fun for the past 10 years. I think Andrew would agree with that.
Fair enough. So as we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we are going to go into a segment that I call generic questions. This is where I ask, those of you that have seen my videos before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite tag team, and favorite superstar of all time, and favorite entrance theme. Basically, the questions that I'm sure they get asked on Twitter on a daily basis, but now they'll have a place to be like, look, I've answered this, go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time, Rich?
Oh, that's tough because I have a lot. All right. I think Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 19, like the first time they locked up.
21?
I think it was 21 or WrestleMania 19. Whatever was the first one.
Jericho was 19, so I think that one was 21.
Yeah. So Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels. I love that match. I watch that match like 3 times a year. The last Okada versus Kenny match, I watch every so often because it's like just they. That's an interesting match to me because that's also on par with the first Shawn Michaels Undertaker match at WrestleMania. You know, I think that was WrestleMania 25.
Yep.
The Okada Kenny match and that Shawn Michaels Undertaker match have a very like similar place in my heart where it's like everything is done so perfectly. But with the Okada Kenny match, it's the one where Kenny won. And I remember watching that match, being up at like 3 a.m. my time to watch it, cheering to not wake my wife up at the end of the match and like crying like an infant, basically, you know, just kind of like in my living room watching it and then being like, he did it. And then going for like a nice run after that. It was very cool. Like as a wrestling fan, I feel like that was like such a cool moment, you know? And probably like some Eddie Guerrero match. Like Eddie Guerrero is like one of my favorites. Like I love Shawn Michaels versus Shawn Michaels versus Mankind. I think St. Valentine's Day Massacre, like that first like a really bloody Mankind Shawn Michaels match. I think that like those are it. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of matches that I really enjoy. But I think I don't dwell on it, so it rotates. Like for example, like last night's show, from Double or Nothing, the one match that really did it for me, and like the card was great and the matches were great. Every match was great, but I really liked the trios match between Death Triangle and House of Black.
I've not seen that at time of recording. I've literally just got up to that match.
Like that for me was like. I watch it and like my wife does not care about pro wrestling whatsoever, but we had a great time last night. We were having a couple of drinks. We're watching wrestling. The wrestling's on TV. And I was like, if somebody asked me, why do you like pro wrestling? Give me an example. Legitimately, that match from last night, definitely the example, you know, like hard hitting, super quick. Everybody looked gnarly, very unique characters. And that's what I love about like the genre / sport.
Fair enough. Favorite pay-per-view of all time?
I'm gonna say WrestleMania 2000. I think the one with Rock and Hogan.
That's 18.
18? Okay. I feel like I can see like my memory with this stuff is like so terrible at this point. WrestleMania 18, I think that was a great time watching it. And just because of that nutty match, it stands out in my memory. Apart from that, the All In.
Ooh.
It's like it's WrestleMania 18 and then All In. And I think I've watched All In like 10 times since it happened, you know, like from start to finish.
Oh, wow. Favorite tag team of all time?
Dudley Boys, dude. Like favorite tag team of all time, it's Dudley Boys. Close second, New Age Outlaws. But Dudleys have always been my guys. Like two hard hitting, like New York dudes, you know, and like that has always been like for some reason it's always been the Dudley Boys. You know, like they make me smile like so much. I love watching their matches. I love the attitudes. I just like two ass kickers from my hometown, you know?
Fair enough. Favorite theme song of all time? Favorite
what?
Theme song, as in wrestling entrance theme.
Oh, you know what? That's a good question because I feel like it hovers, right? Like, for example, like if you let's say you ask me tomorrow, I'll say Mr. Ass's theme song. Like I'm an ass man. One of the greatest theme songs of all time. Road Dogg's theme song, one of the greatest theme songs of all time. I'm going to be a butt and go Stone Cold Steve Austin, man. Like, there's nothing like hearing that glass breaking. Like, the glass breaking, the riff, the attitude, him coming out all wobbly-necked, looking at the crowd. As a face, coming out as a heel. You know what I'm saying? Like just the way Austin would eye the crowd during those riffs, fantastic. Also, King of Kings, like King of Kings, Evolution, all the Motorhead, Triple H themes, friggin' fantastic.
I agree. And then finally, as we wrap this up, your favorite superstar or wrestler of all time?
Of all time, honestly, like I gotta go Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Dude Love Mankind. That dude, and this again, I feel like this is like a very pat or trite response where like I could say that dude got me through high school. Watching his matches, watching the Japan stuff that he did, the brutal stuff he did with Terry Funk, the brutal stuff he did with everybody else in Japan, ECW, WCW, all the Vader feud. Oh my God. All that stuff got me through high school, and like, here's a little tidbit. When I was in high school, I had very long and curly hair. I went to a private/parochial school. So it was like the white button down with the tie and my hair down over my face. I did not want to be there. A lot of the quote unquote bullies in my school would call me Mankind,
Oh, wow.
But I took that as a point of pride. And I remember one day I got into a fight with one kid because he kept calling me Mankind. And it was the night after he won the championship. And I turned around and pretty much before we got into a scuffle, I was like, yo, this dude won the belt last night. I don't know what you promised. And that shut him up. It was like a weird, like, kind of thing. Like in the back of an English class, like two dummy high school kids arguing about pro wrestling. But yeah, they like definitely Mick Foley. I would say like Eddie Guerrero, definitely up there. Macho Man Randy Savage, definitely up there. Shawn Michaels, like huge fan of Shawn Michaels. And like modern era, Kenny Omega, Okada. Love those dudes for a good long while. Like I was a big CM Punk guy. So yeah, I like the work rate guys, Yeah,
fair enough. So
how about you?
My favorite of all time, it's got to be Danielson.
Okay.
He really speaks to me because I loved his, like, I'll call it his monster run. Like the run that led to the WrestleMania 30. I was so behind him. And then
fantastic, yeah.
And then I just love the stuff he's doing in AEW right now. Like,
yeah,
I love the Blackpool Combat Club. Before then, I loved his I'm not here to make stars, I'm here to kick their head in sort of gimmick, if you know what I mean. But I haven't had that question flipped on me for a while, so I appreciate that.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. So as we wrap this up, Rich, the question I had all my videos on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of way. So what is one video or podcast that you're like, don't go back and watch that? I've grown a lot since then. And then what is one that you're like, if you want to know my body of work, go and check that out?
The earlier Mat Men's are, I don't want to say they're cringy, but they are a far cry from what we're doing now. So you wouldn't get an idea of the show if you started from day one. And I think maybe like the first year and a half is also not available on YouTube, but they might be available on gfqnetwork.com. If you want to do a comparison, sure. Watch those old Mat Men's and watch a new Mat Men now. And I have the luxury / privilege of having two other podcasts available, like for my own personal thing. So like I do BTC 2.0, Behind the Counter 2.0, which is about comic books. I'm trying to do 100 creator. And I just smacked my microphone. I'm trying to do 100 creator interviews. And that's a point of pride for me. It's a lot of fun, so go check that out. I also do a film podcast with my buddy Alex called Film Class Zeros. We went to film school together. And that's a podcast that maybe drops like once a month that we talk about movies that we like. And I'm pretty proud of that, and that's not visual. That's just, like audio. And I would say like, watch every Mat Men every week. And that's not like a shameless plug, but I do think we try to get better and better with every episode. We try to put a lot of pride in every episode, a little bit of work, because now we actually have people helping us. We have producers, Jonathan, we have MG Geek, trying to help us make the show a better product. And it has taken the show to new heights, which I'm very proud of. So I would say, like, watch that every week, and you'll see like a good combination of like serious analysis, but also a lot of serious silliness.
Fair enough. So where can the good people find you as we wrap this up?
The good people can find me on Twitter at BTC Rich, and that's about it. That's all I have. No Facebook. My Instagram is it's just pictures of action figures that I like, that I take. But Twitter, yeah, like BTC Rich on Twitter.
Where can they find you? For people that may not know, where can they find your show?
Where can they find what?
Where can they find Matt Men and things like that?
Matt Men Podcast on Twitter, Matt Men Podcast on YouTube, Matt Men Podcast on Instagram, Matt Men Podcast. If you search for F4W Matt Men Podcast, we are on the Wrestling Observer Network. You can follow Andrew at Andrew Zarian on Twitter. You can follow me at BTC Rich on Twitter. We're kind of everywhere. Just find us, talk to us, DM us, message us, message me, talk about wrestling and comics. Like I'm down with everything, dude.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It's Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow bodyslam.net and the WrestleWatch podcast for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the WrestleWatch podcast. And follow TTR Clips for clips from my interviews. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Bye.